let's say you get reelected, when you walk back into Congress, for the second time with new priorities perhaps, what are the top 3 issues on your mind?
Well, I think the top 3 issues are the issues that are concerning to most people. So that's inflation, crime, and the border. We need to do something about inflation to lower gas prices, lower food prices, and we can do that by a resurgence of energy independence, opening up auctions for leases, permitting. And then in Iowa, we have a great story with renewables, and we can do both renewable and fossil fuels, but we need to get prices down. Gasoline prices are also related to food prices. So whether it's, diesel tractors, whether it is natural gas for fertilizer, whether it is transporting goods back and forth, all of that is related to food prices. So both food and fuel prices can come down. So I think inflation is the top issue, and also prices on prescription drugs. I have several bills on lowering prices for prescription drugs. One is a biosimilar bill to get to a generic insulin, and that can be done. It's feasible. It can happen now. Just requires a little legislative change. And then working on both border and crime. People have seen, untold numbers of people coming across our southern border, but more importantly, you have people on the terror watch list, and you have fentanyl and synthetic fentanyl. And you all have done reports on the synthetic fentanyl that looks like Halloween candy. And last year, a record number, 107,000 deaths from overdoses. And in our young population, 18 to 45 years of age. So that is a tremendous issue. And then we have seen crime skyrocket through soft on crime policies, be it cashless bail, be it defund the police. We've had several law enforcement roundtables. I've met with our sheriffs and our police. In our state, we did both police reform, and we've also had Back the Blue. And I think we need to be able to encourage our police, hold them accountable, but we also need to support them in the job that they do every single day protecting us.
I wanted to ask about your crime policies. When you talk about, being soft on crime and defunding the police, are you seeing this anywhere in Iowa's 1st district, or why is this top of mind for you and should be for voters here?
Well, I think that you see it both in Iowa and you see it all over the country. So when I visit in Scott County, or I visit in Des Moines County, Burlington, Fort Madison, you're seeing increasing crime, whether it's crime with guns, crimes with knives, but there is increased crime that we're seeing throughout our district, especially along our river towns. So it is something that is brought up to me when I visit with law enforcement. They also talk about the increase in drug trafficking, whether it's in around Scott County, Muscatine County, Clinton County, whether it's heroin, fentanyl, or whether it's in our southern counties in the district, whether it's methamphetamine. But yes, there is an increase in crime. People are seeing that. People feel less safe. So it's not just in other large blue cities. It's even right here in Iowa.
You list government accountability as one of your top issues, when you talk to campaign voters. What does that mean to you, and how do you want to work towards that?
Well, I think government accountability for me means, number one, looking at our CDC and their guidance, and can the CDC take research and then translate that into a message and a plan for how we address a pandemic. As we saw during the pandemic, there was a lag time. So, looking at accountability to the CDC, we still haven't redone our strategic national stockpile. We know that we need to diversify our supply chain rather than having reliance upon the Chinese Communist Party for PPE and for antibiotics and for testing reagents. So those types of accountability, by having oversight in what things we did wrong, what things we did right, such as Operation Warp Speed and getting a vaccine out to people. We need accountability, as we've seen with the FBI recently, with doing raids on the homes of protesters. And so that is a type of accountability. We need to have an investigation into the origins of COVID-19, which we have not had done, despite the fact that we have asked for that several times. So those are the things that we need to investigate, that we need oversight. We need oversight on the border, on our border policies. So I think there are things that we can have oversight, but we also need to be able to govern. And so I think it's very important that we're able to put forth legislation. One of the things I mentioned was prescription drug prices. And so the Republicans unveiled their commitment to America, which is an economy that is strong, a nation that is safe, a future that's built on freedom, and also government accountability. So I think those are things that we're looking forward to implement. Parents' Bill of Rights, that's a method of having government accountability so that parents aren't called domestic terrorists because that they go to a school board meeting. None of us condone violence. I do not condone violence, but I think for people to peacefully protest their government is something that is a constitutional right that we should be able to support.
I want to move on to the economy and specifically trade, which you have listed as one of your top priorities. What specific policies would you be willing to fight for to help both large and small businesses in Iowa's 1st District when it comes to trade?
Well, both for our manufacturing economy and our agricultural economy, trade is extremely important. So whether those are trade practices that are free trade practices and fair trade that don't penalize the United States, don't have currency manipulation, don't have goods and services that are shipped overseas and then they're left there in a port, then they're tainted and they're refused and declined. We've seen those types of unfair trade practices go on. But we know that we need trade both with Europe, but we need trade in Asia as well. And so continuing to work on trade policies which are supportive of our agricultural economy as well as our manufacturing economy are very important to Iowa and to Iowa's 1st Congressional District.
Do you have any specific trade policies in mind?
So we had looked at the TTP before. I was not in Congress when that was done, but looking at the TTP, other trade policies. We know that Iowa's worked very diligently to get trade with South Korea and also trade in the Asian countries, and we continue to work on that. China is a trade partner for the United States, but it is a trade partner that has unfair trade practices, and so we can negotiate those trade deals. It's something that Congress does in concert with the administration.
I want to go to healthcare and something that you briefly touched on at the beginning, but you've talked a lot about bringing down the high costs of healthcare, and you talked a lot about how healthcare is unaffordable for a lot of Iowans. What specific policies would you have in mind that Congress could do to help bring down some of those costs?
Well, some of them I've already mentioned. I've submitted bills, a bill for biosimilars. These are medications that are chemically equivalent to another medication. Top of mind is insulin, and that's what drove this particular policy. So you can have generic insulin, but just through a quirk in how our code system is, it's not dispensed. So altering that will allow generic insulin. There also is innovation, artificial intelligence, wearable devices, technology that can help us, number one, to have behavioral changes, to have healthier lifestyles. Number two, that can detect and pick up diseases earlier, so they're treated at an earlier stage, and then continue what we're doing with rare and orphan drugs to treat chronic diseases. And as we just saw this week, a drug that is getting approved for Alzheimer's. So these are ways to treat chronic diseases that are very debilitating, they're very costly, but being able to detect, treat them early, and then help people and motivate people to have healthier lifespans, which will also help to bring down the cost of healthcare. Also using artificial intelligence within our Medicare and Medicaid programs that help detect fraud. Those are all things that can help to save money, can increase affordability, and increase access to healthcare. One of the things I've championed since I've been in Congress and actually as a state senator was telehealth. We saw telehealth expand during the pandemic, and part of that was that technology was at the level where telehealth became very much usable and feasible and acceptable to people. Our technology had better imaging, better communication with multiple groups that were in different locations, not just in one location. So I continue to push for and advocate for an expansion of telehealth and telehealth parity. And I think that we can continue to see how that will help both in rural areas and in urban areas. But along with telehealth, that also requires us to have broadband. And so both as a state senator and in Congress, I've been pushing to expand broadband and make sure that we have cable to the last mile so that people have access both to telehealth, telework, and telelearning.
Staying within healthcare, you are very publicly pro-life. In Congress, how far would you be willing to vote when it comes to things like federal abortion restrictions?
Well, I am pro-life with exceptions for life of the mother, rape, and incest. That's been my longstanding policy. When you look at the growth, the scientific growth of a fetus, we know that an infant is pain capable at 15 weeks. We know that the fetus is viable at 20 weeks. I also have knowledge of what happens in late-term and partial birth abortion. So I think that as we're looking at things, where the American public is, where I am, the Dobbs decision turned this back over to the elected representatives. Elected representatives are both state and federal. So I would prefer to see this happen at the state level, but at the federal level to have abortion with no pro-life with no abortions after 15 weeks, with exceptions for life of the mother, rape and incest, I think is a policy that the majority of Americans agree with.
2 years ago, you had the pleasure of experiencing one of the closest congressional races in the country. Just 6 votes separated you and Rita Hart. What are you doing this time around to help widen that gap for yourself?
Well, certainly 6 votes is not a very large margin, but it underscores that every single vote counts. So I would really encourage people to vote, register to vote if you're not registered to vote, and to vote. Every vote counts, regardless of who you vote for. It's one of our honors and privileges that we have in this country. And for me, I continue to go out either in my congressional duties throughout the district. As you remember, when I first got into office, I went to all 24 counties in the 2nd Congressional District, went to all of them to do vaccine clinics, talk about the vaccine, but I've also encouraged the CDC and NIH to be transparent and honest about side effects and to help people make the appropriate decisions for themselves. So I continue to travel throughout the district, both the 24 counties of the 2nd Congressional District, which I currently represent, as well as the additional 4 new counties of the new district. We have excellent constituent services. We're known for that. Our staff is known to be very timely, to be very responsive. So we visit, we're accessible, we're available, we respond to emails and phone calls. We make ourselves available out in the public, and we're passing legislation that I've passed 13 bills in the time that I've been in Congress, had 5 of them signed at the White House. So I've had the privilege of being at the White House when bills were signed that I helped promote. And a lot of these bills come from conversations that I have with people within the district. So they're motivating me and inspiring me to work hard for them. So I'm honored to be able to serve. And yes, I would like to at least triple my margin going into this election.
If you get reelected, you will still have a Democratic president. What is a bipartisan bill or issue that you are working on and would like to see passed over the next 2 years if you win reelection?
One of the things I've already mentioned is bills to lower prescription drug prices. So I'd like to see my bill come forward. We have a bill on legal immigration that I'd like to see passed into law. We have the Afghan Readjustment Act is another bill that I would like to see passed into law from those who came here at the turnover of Afghanistan to the Taliban. Interpreters, people who helped us, helped our military, helped save the lives of our military service members. And as a veteran, that's extremely important to me. I'd like to see us do more on reopening our energy sector and energy independence. And as we're watching what's happening in Europe and what's happening now with their energy cost and energy availability, they're in for a very rough winter. We already have reports of people burning trash, cutting down ancient forests because they had shut down their fossil fuel sectors and right now don't have enough energy. So I think those are things that I think most people would be agreeable to do. And I think the president would be willing to sign. Under President Biden, there has been, to my knowledge, one land auction of public or federal lands for oil and gas drilling. And under President Obama, during the same period of time, there were 47. So I do think this is a policy that the majority of the American people would want. We know energy demand is going up, and we can transition to cleaner energy, less carbon emissions, but we need to do that in a way that makes sense and gives us affordable energy both for our manufacturing sector, for individuals within their homes, and to be able to drive back and forth to work. So I think there's ways that we can work with the president and get legislation passed that benefits people within the 1st Congressional District, but also all of the United States.
Wrapping up, if things don't go your way on November 8th, will you support your opponent in this democratic process?
I think the democratic process is very important that we uphold and that we honor. I was part of getting election integrity changes made and passed in Iowa, and I think the election system in Iowa has very high election integrity, and people can be confident in their vote and trust in our system as we put forward our election laws with our voter ID. So yes, I would support whoever is the winner of this election, and I hope that the people of the first congressional district will see to reelect me as a bipartisan member of Congress who has worked very hard to serve them and has been able to execute on that promise.